Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello friends, welcome to the class of Maritime Law. Today we will discuss the second part of navigation and safety, wherein we will specifically talk about manning and maintenance of ships. I am Dr. Ashutosh Acharya, Senior Assistant Professor from Law Center 2, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Friends, in the previous classes we had discussed about law of the sea. We had talked about in detail admiralty laws, wherein we talk about claims and jurisdictions. In the last class, when we started with the first part of our lecture pertaining to navigation and safety, we had talked about the policy making body, which is National Shipping Board. Then we also talked about National Board, which takes care of the seafarers, welfare of the seafarers, how they make policies, what are the areas that they take into account while they make rules and regulations, while they make laws, either by the National Shipping Board or by the Welfare Board for seafarers. We also talked about in detail and understood the nationality of ships and understood registration of ships, how they are interlinked, what are the issues that comes into being as far as nationality of ships are concerned, what are the issues that comes into being as far as registration of ships is concerned. We discussed in detail what is the process of registration in India under the merchant shipping rules as well as the act, what are the requirements that are to be undertaken in order to register a particular ship in India. In a situation where the ship is not present in India, how a ship that seeks to register in India can obtain provisional certificate from a consular situated above, situated abroad. Therefore, we see that different rules makes it easier and it facilitates the complete mechanism with respect to registration and nationality of ship. What are the other peculiar features as far as registration of ships are concerned, what difficulties can come and what are the solutions that are mentioned under Merchant Shipping Act were also discussed in the last class. Today, we will now talk about manning and maintenance of ships. Manning here implies that what all individuals and personnel are required in order to see through the ship, what all equipments are required and how to ensure respective equipments and personnels required over a particular ship, because ships are of different kinds, vessels are of different kinds and different vessels have different requirements. So, as per the requirement of a particular ship or vessel, what are the requirements with respect to manning and competency, how to make a particular ship competent, not only with respect to its construction, but also we need to see that whether particular appropriate manpower is present as far as manning and competency of a ship is concerned. We also will look at the maintenance part of the ship, how to maintain the ship with its all required necessary equipments. So, let us first understand a outline of the structure of the ship. As friends, you can see that there are different parts of the ship and these parts that we see in the picture are quite general in nature. If you look at these words one by one, such as a starboard side, it represents the right side of the ship. If you look at the deck, then this is the portion which is represented as far as deck is concerned, and a deck is a permanent covering over a compartment or a hull of a ship. On a boat or ship, the primary or upper deck is the horizontal structure that forms the roof of the hull. So, if I say this is the roof of the hull, then obviously the portion below the deck will be considered to be the hull of the ship, thereby holding the hull together, strengthening it and serving as the primary working surface. We also have here, apart from deck, the front portion is known as the bow. It is the forward part of the hull of a ship or boat, and it is made in this particular shape as it cuts down the air in order to move ahead easily. This is the front side or forward side of the ship, and below this we have the bulbous bow. The role of the bulbous bow is to separate the or cut out the water, sea water, as it is underneath the water column. It cuts out the water and helps the movement of the ship in furtherance. Then we also have here the anchor of the ship. The utility of the anchor of the ship, friends, is that if a ship wants to be hauled or has to be put on brake, and if you want to stop the movement of the ship, this hull of the ship is placed beneath the water and the ship will then not move. So, these are considered to be the brakes of the ship. Then we have keel. Keel is the bottommost portion of the ship, and this bottommost portion is the plate over which the hull is placed and the other parts of the ship are framed. So, it is the basic frame over which the ship is built. So, keel is the most important or the fundamental part of a ship, upon which the whole ship is constructed, upon which the whole ship is balanced and based. Then we have the hull. A hull is the part of a ship that extends below the water line to cover and protect water from entering in everything that is stored within. So, it is a kind of a big container that protects any cargo or individual that are placed inside that particular ship. So, it protects from water from entering. Everything that is stored within the main ship structure is covered and protected by the ship's hull. Now, apart from the keel and hull, here at the back side we see propeller and rudder. The propeller's role is to force the ship to move forward. It propels or it helps in the movement of the ship towards this particular direction. Then we have the stern, which is used to identify or to place the ship's direction. As far as ship's navigation is concerned, it is the stern that helps in identifying and maintaining a particular direction. In what direction a ship should be moved, whether right direction or left direction or straight, or at what angle or at what degree it should be maintained. It is by using the stern, the direction of the ship is finalized. Then we have the AFT rear side, and apart from that you have the chimney, which is also known as the funnel. So, these are some basic parts that are available as far as any particular ship is concerned. A ship may contain more than these basic parts also, depending upon the nature of the ship, depending upon the size of the ship, and depending upon the working of a particular ship. Different additional parts may be added to these particular ships, but this was the general built up of a particular ship. When this general built up is there, it shows that all of these aspects must be competent and proper, so that a ship is seaworthy to sail from one part of the world to another part of the world. So, to be a seafaring ship, to be a proper seafaring ship, to be a seaworthy ship, all these parts that we have discussed must be in proper working conditions, and some other parts may also be there depending upon the nature and characteristic features of a particular peculiar ship. Now, when we talk about manning of ships, we talk about competency of ship with respect to its personnels. Now, the statutory obligations in respect of manning of Indian vessels emanate from the Merchant Shipping Act 1987 as it was amended, where in section 75 and section 76 of the Principal Act, that is Merchant Shipping Act 1958, have been substituted to conform to the International Convention on Standards of Training, Certification and Watchkeeping for Seafarers 1978. So, this particular international convention lays down uniform guidelines as far as training is concerned, standard of training is concerned, certification of those trainers are concerned or the personnel who have been trained are concerned, then watchkeeping certification is concerned. So, what is the standard, international standard should be followed nationally also in order to have a uniformity. As the ship goes from one part of the world to another part of the world, let us say a ship comes from France to China, then if there is uniformity with respect to rules and regulations pertaining to standard of training, certification and watchkeeping, it becomes easier for the receiving state to consider that particular ship to be properly manned and consider that particular ship to be a seaworthy ship. In case of lacking of certifications, in case of lacking of training, the safety of the ship could be compromised. So, uniform rules and regulations are generally accepted by the states, so that in their national legal system also they can come up to international standards, and their shipping can also flourish in different parts of the world. So, it also functions as a matter of reciprocity, also is of major concern, because such conventions take care of life at sea or protection of cargo at sea, and therefore, it becomes pertinent to be accepted by national legal systems. Now, certificate to be held by officers of ships as per not only national, but also international standards. Every Indian ship other than home trade ship of less than 200 tons gross. So, I repeat, every Indian ship, that means a ship is registered in India having the nationality of India, other than home trade ship, that means that it is not only trading within the country, of less than 200 tons gross, engaged in coasting trade of India when going to sea from any port or place, shall be provided with officers duly certificate under this act according to the following scale, namely. So, whenever a ship goes abroad, not trading within India, but trading abroad India or apart from India, going to other part of the world, different countries, these certain certificates are endowed upon those seafarers. So, this certificate are known as duly certificate, and they are identified for different categories of personnel or individuals for different posts. Different duly certificates or categories of certificates have been created. So, in every case with a duly certificate master. So, a ship must have a master who is duly certified or is carrying duly certificate. So, there has to be a master with respect to duly certificate, and a master will be given a duly certificate if it has the required qualification, if it has passed the requisite examination, crossed and completed requisite training, only then that particular master will have the duly certificate. The different types of examinations and its process, everything is also mentioned under the Merchant Shipping Act itself. Further, if the ship is a foreign going ship, it must have an officer holding a certificate not lower than that of a first mate, second mate and navigational watchkeeping officer. So, in different scenarios, depending upon the size and tonnage of the ship, a ship could have a first mate. If first mate is not available, then second mate, and it must at least have always a navigational watchkeeping officer. Who is qualified to be a first mate? Generally a captain or a duly certified master is known as a first mate. Then if first mate is not available, then depending on the tonnage and the requirement of the ship, if second mate is also allowed, then that particular second mate will be having competency not equivalent to a master, but also it may be equivalent to at least navigational watchkeeping officer. Who is a navigational watchkeeping officer? An officer who is available on the deck to keep a watch on the navigation of the ship, that there is no danger or negative apprehension available or present as far as the route of the ship is concerned. It will also look into any possible hurdle that might come into being as far as the navigation of the ship is concerned. It will take into account that if any ship is coming opposite to the same route of the ship navigating, what proper necessary approach to be taken, whether the navigation should be changed or diverted in order to safeguard the navigation of the ship or to safeguard the ship itself, what precautionary measures to be taken, what decision to be taken in order to protect the ship and its personnel as well as the cargo. So, it is a necessary requirement that at least a navigational watchkeeping officer is present at all times. Then, in case of home trade ship with an officer holding a certificate not lower than that of a mate and navigational watchkeeping officer. A first mate or first officer is a licensed mariner and head of the deck department of a merchant ship. The chief mate is customarily a watchstander and is in charge of the ship's cargo and deck crew. The actual title used will vary by ship's employment, by type of ship, by nationality and by trade. So, different nomenclatures could be used depending upon the nationality of the ship. A second mate or second officer is a licensed member of the deck department of a merchant ship holding a second mate's certificate of competence by an authorized governing state of the International Maritime Organization IMO. The second mate is the third in command or on some ocean liners fourth in command, and a watchkeeping officer, customarily the ship's navigator. So, second mate's role becomes pertinent here. Other duties vary, but the second mate is often the medical officer and in charge of maintaining distress signaling equipment. On oil tankers, the second mate usually assists the chief mate with the cargo operations. The navigator's role focuses on creating the ship's passage plans. A passage plan is a comprehensive, a step-by-step description of how the voyage is to proceed from berth to berth or one port to another. So, navigator's role also becomes important as it focuses on creating the ship's passage plan. So, from what route a ship will be going through. So, therefore, it will be the navigator's role to take into account that what are the weather conditions of a particular route, what are the safety conditions of a particular route. It needs to also ponder upon a situation that whether the route that the ship will be following is affected by pirates or not affected by pirates, what should be the safe navigational route. If it is to stop at different ports, then what would be the best, efficient, smallest route or fastest route through which a ship can reach in different ports or through different ports. So, a number of aspects have to be undertaken, number of scenarios are to be undertaken as far as decision with respect to passage of a particular ship is concerned or the navigational route of a particular ship is concerned. So, therefore, it focuses on creating the ship's passage plans. A passage plan, as I said, is a comprehensive step-by-step description of how the voyage is to proceed from berth to berth or one port to another. The plan includes undocking, departure, the en route portion of a voyage, approach and mooring at the destination. So, everything with respect to navigation, sailing, etc. is to be taken into account. The planning especially has to be taken into account by the navigator, and this planning then gets approved also. So, if a ship deviates from the already planned route, then sometimes it may also incur damages, it may also incur certain liabilities, it may at certain instances be considered to be the negligent act of the master or the ship. So, a planned route is to be followed by the ship, and this planning considering almost all the aspects of weather and other conditions are to be taken into account by the navigator. A navigational watchkeeping officer is the officer on deck who keeps watch on the navigation of the vessel. the review committee appointed by the government under the chairmanship of Director General of Shipping in 1991 has recommended that instead of specifying the manning scales in the Act itself, as has been done in the present, Section 76 may be amended to give rule making powers to the government to prescribe different manning scales for different trades, different seasons, maintenance of communication watch, manner in which watch on board ships should be kept, with provisions for specific watch periods and adequate rest period in between two watches, etc. The committee also recommended insertion of a new section, that is section 76A, to require every Indian ship as per international practice to carry on board a safe manning scale document. Such a comprehensive rule would facilitate a change in the manning scales warranted by a specific category of ships engaged in coastal waters and by specific trade requirements. So, section 76 would be talking about the manning and scaling of the ship or manning scales of different types of ships. At the same time, 76A would be talking about requirement of every Indian ship as per international practice to carry on board a safe manning scale document, and that document will tell us that whether proper manning scales have been complied with as per the rules and regulations laid out by central government or not. So, it is the required document which makes a particular ship competent to sail from one part of the country to another country. The amendment of section 76 and insertion of a new section 76 recommended by the review committee are as under 76, and it says every Indian ship going to sea from any port or place shall be provided with duly certificate master, and such other officers and engineers duly certificate under this act according to the scales prescribed in this behalf, and different manning scales for different tonnage and types of ships may be prescribed. The central government may make rules to prescribe the manning of Indian ships by duly certificate officers, which will be dependent on the season, which will be dependent on the tonnage of the ship and other certain bases. And on such certain basis, the central government may make rules to prescribe manning of Indian ships by duly certificate officers and engineers for the maintenance of a continuous efficient watch at sea, in port and in engine room, with provision for adequate rest period between the watches, and to ensure maintenance of safety appliances, machinery and safe carriage of cargoes and passengers. If more than one personnel for the same particular type of activity is required, more manning is required, then the central government may prescribe minimum number of manning, minimum number of expertise that are to be placed as far as a particular ship is concerned. It may prescribe a minimum number of requisite engineers expert in a particular area with respect to the propulsion of the sea ship, or with respect to electronic aspects pertaining to the ship at sea. Then certain minimum requirements are to be followed by all the ships that are sailing. In particular, and without prejudice to the generally of the foregoing power, such rules may provide for a manning scale to take into account all or any of the following. So, these are the following things that are to be taken into account: the classification of the vessels with reference to tonnage, the propulsion power and duration of voyages. So, a classification of vessels has to be made on the basis of tonnages. So, a ship may be classified to be of maximum weight tonnage of 50 tonnage or maximum deadweight tonnage of 100 tonnage. So, different based on different tonnages, weightages, a ship's classification may be made, and based on those classifications different manning scales may be prescribed, and those different manning scales will require different types of personnel to be placed on the ships having duly certificate, of course, not only based on tonnage, but also based on the propulsion power of a particular ship. Classification could be made. A classification could also be made based on duration of the voyages. As we see, there is time charter party agreements. So, what is the duration of the voyage? Based on that particular duration, a classification can also be identified, and accordingly manning could be made. Secondly, the seasons of fair, weather and foul season. Thirdly, special requirements of particular type and trade of ships. Provision of officer and engineers for training on board to train marine officers and marine engineers, and training of other seamen. Maintenance of the communication watch as required under the radio rules, and maintenance of navigational and communication equipment. Any special provision required for the purpose of mooring and unmooring of the ship. Manning of unmanned engine room or any other machinery associated with it. Nature of cargo carried and the means provided for loading and discharging of the same. Maintenance of watertight integrity. Prevention of pollution of the sea. Ability to carry out search and rescue operations at sea. So, therefore, we see under clause 3 in particular and without prejudice to the generally of the foregoing power, such rules may be provided for manning a scale, and it will take into account all or the following things that are mentioned here. Further, we see after taking into account the manning scales and the requirements as we have discussed under section 76, we see that under 76A clause 1, every Indian ship shall carry on board a safe manning document which will have all those details that are mentioned under section 76 in the prescribed form, specifying the minimum safe manning as provided for the manning scale. That is, what number of engineers, what all types of engineers are required, what all types of seafarers, other crew members are required, everything. So, if the minimum number is mentioned, the surveyor will then check that whether the minimum number is actually present, whether the documents requirements are satisfied or not. So, this document will be the detail, will provide the details as far as the manning availability at the ship is concerned. So, the document in the prescribed form is specifying the minimum safe manning as provided for the manning scale prescribed in this behalf. Every such document shall include the following: a clear statement of the ship's name, its port of registry, its trading limits, and its distinctive call sign. As we had already earlier discussed in the previous class, then when registry takes place, a different sign is provided to a particular ship. So, that document will not only contain the details of the manning, but will also contain the details of the registry, which could be the name of the ship, which could be the port of registry, its trading limits, and also its distinctive call sign. A table showing the numbers and the grade of personnel required to be carried together with any specific conditions for such carriage. A statement as to limitations, if any, on the validity of the document with a reference to manning and the nature of service upon which it is engaged. The date of issue and expiry date of such document together with signature and seal of the person appointed in this behalf. Now, friends, what happens if any of the requirement that is mentioned in the document is not complied with? A simple example that we can take is that if future this particular ship, let us say a particular ship is having the document where minimum requirement has been placed with respect to manning, but the ship has not complied with the minimum requirement of manning and competency of a particular ship, then if any wrongful act happens or if any negligence happens by the ship, then the insurance company could take into account this particular fault of the ship owner or the master of the ship as far as non-compliance of the document is concerned. The owner or the master could be then held liable for not complying with these documents. In that scenario, the ship will not be considered to be a seaworthy ship, and if a ship is not seaworthy, then it should not be allowed to sail, because it will then be a risk to not only the ship, but also to its cargo, and also at the same time life present on the ship. Safety of life at sea. Apart from, so manning forms and competency forms an important segment and part as far as seaworthiness of the ship is concerned. At the same time, there are other requirements as far as cargo is concerned and as far as safety of life at sea is concerned. So, there are specific provisions under Merchant Shipping Act which talks about safety of life at sea, and it talks about how a ship should be maintained, what are the requirements of the ship that a ship should ensure in order to comply the requirements of safety of life at sea. The international law with respect to safety of life at sea is mentioned under the convention known as Safety of Life at Sea Convention, and this convention lays down certain guidelines as far as protection of life at sea is concerned, how ships can be regulated as far as protection of life or safety of life at sea is concerned. So, section 220 talks about, and few other provisions also of the Merchant Shipping Act talks about safety of life at sea, and they are in compliance to SOLAS convention. So, section 220 says that no ship to carry passengers without a certificate of survey. So, a certificate of survey post survey has to be issued by a surveyor, where it surveys the ship and ensures that all the necessary equipments and supplies are in place as far as ship is concerned. Therefore, clause 1 says no ship shall carry more than 12 passengers between ports or places in India, or to or from any port or place in India, from or to any port or place outside India, unless she has a certificate of survey under this part in force. So, the maximum limit without a surveyor certificate is 12 persons, otherwise it must have a certificate of survey under this part in force and applicable to the voyage on which she is about to proceed, or the service on which she is about to be employed, provided that nothing in this section shall apply to any ship which has been granted a certificate under section 235, unless it appears from the certificate that it is inapplicable to the voyage on which the ship is about to proceed. And for that, central government will exclude certain ships which do not require the certificate of the surveyor. So, therefore, unless it appears from the certificate that it is inapplicable to the voyage on which the ship is about to proceed, or the service on which she is about to be employed, or unless there is reason to believe that the ship has, since the grant of the certificate, sustained injury or damage or been found unseaworthy or otherwise inefficient. No customs collector shall grant a port clearance. So, customs collector duty or the job is to grant port clearance, that is, a ship cannot leave without the clearance of customs collector. So, therefore, no customs collector shall grant a port clearance, nor shall any pilot be assigned to any ship for which a certificate of survey is required by this part until after the production of the owner, agent or master thereof of a certificate under this part in force and applicable to the voyage on which she is about to proceed or the service on which she is about to be employed. If any ship for which a certificate of survey is required by this part leaves or attempts to leave any port of survey without a certificate, any customs collector or any pilot on board the ship may detain her until she obtains a certificate. So, a ship can be detained by the customs collector or any pilot if the ship is not carrying the certificate of surveyor or the requisite certificates that a ship must carry before leaving the port. So, under section 235 it has been said that ships with certificates of survey or certificates of partial survey granted outside India. So, 235 if you see has been mentioned as an exception under 220, where it does not require the certificate as far as surveying aspect is concerned. So, what is this exception? 235 says ships with certificates of survey or certificates of partial survey which are granted outside India. Clause 1, when a ship requires to be furnished with a certificate of survey under this part and the central government is satisfied, clause A, subclause A, by the production of a certificate of survey that the ship has been officially surveyed at a port in a country outside India. Secondly, that the requirements of this act are proved by that survey to have been substantially complied with. And thirdly, that certificates of survey granted under this part are accepted in such country in lieu of the corresponding certificates required under the laws in force in that country. So, based on reciprocity, if some other country is provided and here those certificates are recognized, then also it will work equivalent to the certificate provided by the surveyor in India. Then we look at section 221, which talks about the power of surveyor, and it says firstly, the owner or agent of every passenger ship for which a certificate of survey is required under this part shall cause it to be surveyed in the prescribed manner. So, it is the duty of the owner to, or the agent of the owner, to allow the surveyor or to call upon the surveyor to survey the ship. And for the purposes of a survey under this part, a surveyor may at any reasonable time go on board a ship and may inspect the ship and any part thereof, and the machinery, equipment or articles on board thereof, provided that he does not unnecessarily hinder the loading or unloading of the ship, or unnecessarily detain or delay her from proceeding on any voyage. So, it is not only the power of the surveyor, but at the same time it is also the duty of the surveyor that it does not hinder the loading and unloading of the ship. At the same time, it unnecessarily does not detain the ship or hinder the voyage of the ship. If all the requirements are satisfied with the surveyor, it is the duty of the surveyor to survey and provide the certificate post survey. Thirdly, the owner, agent, master and every officer of the ship shall afford to the surveyor all reasonable facilities for a survey and all such information respecting the ship and her machinery and equipment or any part thereof respectively as the surveyor reasonably requires. So, it is also the duty of the owner or agent of the owner or the master to give a round of the ship, to guide the surveyor as far as survey of a particular ship is concerned. Further, section 223 of the Merchant Shipping Act talks about declaration of survey. When a survey under this part is completed, the survey or making it shall forthwith, if satisfied that he can with propriety do so, deliver to the owner, agent or master of the ship surveyed a declaration of survey in the prescribed form containing the following particulars, namely that the hull and machinery of the ship. Friends, we have already understood that what is hull and where it is situated above the keel, above the keel of the ship, below the deck of the ship. It protects the ship from the water that might enter into the ship, the cargo of the ship, the lives of the personnel traveling through that particular ship or any particular ship. So, hull is a protectionist regime as far as the whole structure or construction of the ship is concerned. So, in the surveyor's certificate, it will mention that the hull and the machinery of the ship are sufficient for the service intended and in good condition. As far as machinery is concerned, it will look at the machinery that has been used for the propulsion purposes as far as the sea is concerned, or any other type of machinery or any other different kinds of machinery as far as the sailing of the vessel is concerned, or which are necessary for the navigational aspects of the ship. Whether all the electronic items or electrical items are functioning properly will be surveyed by the surveyor, and on satisfaction it will mention that the requisite elements of the ship are in good conditions or in working conditions. Secondly, that the equipment of the ship is in such condition and that the certificates of the master, mates, engineers or engine drivers and of the radio telegraphy operators are such as are required by this act or any other law for the time being in force and applicable to the ship. So, when we talk about a duly certificate, first mate, second mate, navigational watchkeeper certificate, all of these individuals personnels are available and they have agreed to be employed as far as their individualistic position is concerned, and surveyor is satisfied that proper manning is available in order to sail this particular ship on its voyage. Thirdly, the time, if less than 1 year, for which the hull, machinery and equipment of the ship will be sufficient. Fourthly, the voyages or class of voyages on which as regards construction, machinery and equipment the ship is the surveyor's opinion fit to ply. So, whether a particular ship is fit to go on a voyage which may be a very peculiar kind of voyage, it has a different weather kind of situation, whether it can travel in a certain weather, whether it has proper equipments available, whether the training of the personnel placed on a particular deck are available or not, whether it can travel in a particular route or in a particular season, all of those things are to be surveyed and are to be certified. Then the number of passengers which the ship is in the opinion of the survey fit to carry, how many passengers a particular ship can carry, what is the maximum number the surveyor will identify with respect to the ship, distinguishing if necessary between the respective numbers to be carried on the deck and in the cabins and in different parts of the deck and cabins. The number to be subject to such conditions and variations according to the time of year, the nature of voyage, the cargo carried or other circumstances as the case requires, and any other prescribed particulars in the form that is to be filled by the owner and approved by the surveyor, and then a duly certificate being provided. Then section 224 talks about sending of declaration by owner, agent or master to central government. Clause 1, the owner, agent or master to whom a declaration of survey is given shall within 14 days after the date of the receipt thereof send the declaration to such officer as the central government may appoint in this behalf. And then secondly, if the owner, agent or master fails to do so, once the certificate has been obtained, then within 14 days it has to be sent to the central government in for notification as far as sailing of a particular ship is concerned. If the owner, agent or master fails to do so, he shall forfeit a sum not exceeding 5 rupees for every day during which the sending of the declaration is delayed, and shall pay any sum so forfeited on the delivery of the certificate of survey. Now, section 225 talks about grant of certificate of survey by central government. Upon receipt of declaration of survey, the central government shall, if satisfied that the provisions of this part have been complied with, cause a certificate in duplicate to be prepared and delivered through such officer at the port at which the ship was surveyed as the central government may appoint in this behalf to the owner, agent or master of the ship surveyed, on his applying and paying the sums, if any, mentioned in section 224 as payable on the delivery of a certificate. Secondly, a certificate granted under this section shall be in the prescribed form, shall contain a statement to the effect that the provisions of this part with respect to the survey of the ship and the transmission of the declaration of survey in respect thereof have been complied with, and shall also set forth the particulars concerning the ship, which clauses C, D, E of section 223 require the declaration of survey to contain, as we have discussed in our previous slides, and these are the clauses, clause A, B, C, D, E or any other particular mentioned under section 223 require the declaration of a survey to contain, and any other prescribed particulars. Further, under section 226, we see the power of central government to order a second survey. If the central government is not satisfied as far as the report of the first survey is concerned, then it may order for second survey. So, we see that in clause 1, if a surveyor making a survey under this part refuses to give a declaration of a survey under section 223 with regard to any ship, or gives a declaration with which the owner or agent or master of the ship surveyed is dissatisfied, the central government may, on the application of the owner, agent or master and the payment by him of such fee not exceeding twice the amount of the fee for the previous survey, as the central government may require, direct any other surveyor to survey the ship. So, in this second survey, the surveyor will not be the same. At the same time, an increased fee is to be paid, but this increased fee in any case should not be more than the double the amount of the first fees. So, if it was 100 rupees, it should never be more than 200 rupees, but it will in any case be more than 100 rupees. So, in the second clause of section 226, the surveyor so directed shall forthwith, that is the second surveyor who has been directed shall forthwith survey the ship, and may after the survey either refuse to give a declaration or give such declaration as under the circumstances seems to him proper, and his decision shall, save otherwise provided in this act, be final. So, a second chance is given to a ship owner or to an agent or a master to rectify if any fault was found while the first survey was going on. So, if it is rectified, the second surveyor will certainly allow for a declaration to be sent to the central government as far as the seaworthiness of the ship is concerned. If second surveyor is also not satisfied, then it will be considered to be final and no third chance will be provided. Section 227 talks about duration of certificates of survey. A certificate of survey granted under this part shall not be enforced after the expiration of 1 year from the date of issue. So, it is available, or it is the expiry of the certificate is post 1 year. After the expiration of the period, if less than 1 year, for which the hull, boilers, engines or any of the equipment have been stated in the certificate to be sufficient, or after notice has been given to this given by the central government to the owner, agent or master of the ship to which the certificate relates, that the central government has cancelled or suspended it. Further, if a passenger ship is absent from India at the time when her certificate expires, so if the voyage is, let us say, more than 1 year, or if the voyage has restarted or started immediately before 3 months before, and the ship has not returned back to the Indian port and the survey is still pending or the certificate is expired. So, in any of such situations, if a passenger ship is absent from India at the time when her certificate expires, so we are talking about specifically the passenger ship here. If it expires, the provision of this part, that is part 7, relating to certificate of survey shall not be deemed to be contravened unless she first begins to ply with passengers after her next return to India. Further, section 228 talks about cancellation or suspension of certificate of survey by central government. Any certificate of survey granted under this part may be cancelled or suspended by the central government if it has reason to believe that the declaration by the surveyor of the sufficiency of the hull, boilers, engines or any of the equipment of the ship has been fraudulently or erroneously made, or that certificate has otherwise been issued upon false or erroneous information. Secondly, before any certificate of survey is cancelled or suspended under subsection 1, the holder of the certificate shall be given a reasonable opportunity of showing cause why the certificate should not be cancelled or suspended. So, therefore, a show cause notice will be first given, a fair hearing would be given to the owner, agent or master of the ship in order to satisfy that why his certificate or the certificate of the ship should not be cancelled. Provided that this subsection shall not apply where the central government is satisfied that for some reason to be recorded in writing, it is not reasonably practicable to give to the holder of the certificate an opportunity of showing cause. Now, section 229 talks about alterations in ships subsequent to grant of certificate of survey and additional surveys. So, if any alterations are made post certificate has been issued by the government through the surveyor, then the owner, agent or master of a ship in respect of which a certificate of survey granted under this part is enforced shall, as soon as possible after any alteration is made in the ship's hull, equipment or machinery which affects the efficiency thereof or the seaworthiness of the ship, give written notice to such person as the central government may direct, containing full particulars of the alteration. So, a separate application with full details of the alteration has to be submitted, and if the central government has reason to believe that since the making of the last declaration of survey in respect of a ship, any such alteration as aforesaid has been made in the hull, equipment or machinery of the ship, or the hull, equipment or machinery of the ship have sustained any injury or are otherwise insufficient, the central government then may require the ship to be again surveyed to such extent as it may think fit, and if such requirement is not complied with, may cancel any certificate of survey issued under this part in respect of the said ship, making the ship unseaworthy to be sailed. Further, when such certificate has been issued through the central government, then under section 231, certificate of survey is to be affixed in conspicuous part of ship, where it can be clearly viewed that the ship clears all the requirements and competency requirements post survey as far as the ship is concerned. The owner or master of every ship for which a certificate of survey has been granted under this part shall forthwith on the receipt of the certificate cause one of the duplicates thereof to be affixed and kept affixed so long as the certificate remains in force and the ship is in use on some conspicuous part of the ship where it may be easily read by all persons on board thereof. Section 232 talks about a situation where the ship not to carry passengers in contravention of the act. No ship on any voyage shall carry or attempt to carry passengers in contravention of section 220, where it provides for the requirements of the survey to be fulfilled by the master, owner or the agent of the owner, or shall have on board or in any part thereof a number of passengers which is greater than the number set forth in the certificate of survey as the number of passengers which the ship or the part thereof is fit to carry on that voyage. If the master or any other officer of any ship which carries or attempts to carry passengers in contravention of section 220 is a licensed pilot, he shall be liable to have his license as a pilot cancelled or suspended for such period as the central government may by order specify. Keeping order in passenger ships. Section 233 talks about offences in connection with passenger ships. If in the case of a ship for which a certificate of survey has been granted under this part, any person being drunk or disorderly has been on that account refused admission thereto by the owner or any person in his employ, and after having the amount of his fare, if he has paid it, returned or tendered to him, nevertheless persist in attempting to enter the ship, any person being drunk or disorderly on board the ship is requested by the owner or any person in his employ to leave the ship at any place in India at which he can conveniently do so, and after having the amount of his fare, if he has paid it, returned or tendered to him, does not comply with the request, any person on board the ship after warning by the master or other officer thereof molests or continues to molest any passenger. Fourthly, any person having gone on board the ship at any place and being requested on account of the ship being full by the owner or any person in his employ to leave the ship before it has departed from that place, and having had the amount of his fare, if he has paid it, returned or tendered to him, does not comply with the request. So, in such situation, further any person travels or attempts to travel in the ship without first paying his fare and with intent to avoid payment thereof. Further, any person on arriving in the ship at any place, at the place for which he has paid his fare knowingly and willfully refuses or neglects to quit the ship. Further, any person on board the ship fails when requested by the master or other officer thereof either to pay his fare or to exhibit such ticket or other receipt, if any, showing the payment of his fare as is usually given to persons travelling by and paying fare for the ship, he shall be guilty of an offence under this subsection. So, 233 section of the Merchant Shipping Act provides for substantive offence in connection with the passenger ship and identifies certain instances under which a passenger can be held guilty or his or her action can be considered to be an offence. No person on board any ship, any such ship, shall willfully do or cause to be done anything in such a manner as to obstruct or injure any part of the machinery or tackle of the ship, or to obstruct, impede or molest the crew or any of them in the navigation or management of the ship or otherwise in the execution of their duty on or about the ship. Clause 3 says that the master or other officer of such ship and all persons called by him to his assistance may, without warrant, detain any person who commits any offence under this section and whose name and address are unknown to the master or officer, and convey the offender with all convenient dispatch before the nearest judicial magistrate of first class or the metropolitan magistrate, as the case may be, to be dealt with according to law. Section 234 gives power to exclude drunken passenger from passenger ships. The master of any passenger ship may refuse to receive on board thereof any person who by reason of drunkenness or otherwise is in such a state or misconducts himself in such a manner as to cause annoyance or injury to passengers on board, and if any such person is on board, may put him on shore at any convenient place, and a person so refused admittance or put on shore shall not be entitled to the return of any fare he has paid. Now, the Solas Convention provides for certain guidelines as far as the protection of life at sea is concerned. The Solas Convention in its successive forms is generally regarded as the most important of all international treaties concerning the safety of merchant ships. The first version was adopted in 1914, then in 29 as far as it was we can consider that it was the response of the Titanic disaster, and the third in 1948 and the fourth in 1960. The 1974 version includes the tacit acceptance procedure, which provides that an amendment shall enter into force on a specified date unless before that date objections to the amendment are received from an agreed number of parties. There are certain technical provisions which we need not discuss as far as this particular aspect, but as far as the legal requirements are concerned with respect to those technical aspects, we have touched upon those parts already through Merchant Shipping Act. So, if you look at Solas Convention, we have chapter 1 which talks about general provision, then chapter 2 which talks about construction, and it is subdivided with respect to stability, machinery, electrical installation, and chapter 2 part 2 if you look at it, it talks about fire protection, fire detection and fire extinction. Especially if we talk about the fire protection, fire detection, it includes detailed fire safety provisions for all ships and specific measures for passenger ships, cargo ships and tankers. They include the following principles: division of the ship into main and vertical zones by thermal and structural boundaries, separation of accommodation spaces from remainder of the ship, and various other requirements which are quite technical in nature, but yes, they also have legal repercussions if not followed. If you look at chapter 4, it talks about life saving appliances and arrangements such as lifeboats, rescue boats, life jackets must be present. Further, if you look at chapter 4, it talks about radio communications, wherein the chapter incorporates Global Maritime Distress and Safety System GMDSS. All passenger ships and all cargo ships of 300 gross tonnage and upwards on international voyages are required to carry equipment designed to improve the chances of rescue following an accident, including satellite emergency position indicating radio beacons and search and rescue responders for the location of the ship or survival craft. Then regulation in chapter 4 cover undertakings by contracting governments to provide radio communication services as well as ship requirements for carriage of radio communication equipment. This chapter is closely linked to the radio regulations of the International Telecommunication Union. Then chapter 5 talks about safety of navigation, and chapter 6 talks about carriage of cargoes, chapter 7 talks about carriage of dangerous goods, and then various other parts are also mentioned. Chapter 8 talks about nuclear ships, chapter 9 talks about management for the safe operation of ships, safety measures of high speed aircraft, special measures to enhance maritime safety, then special measures to enhance maritime security, and additional safety measures of bulk carriers. All of these are the different chapters that takes into account different areas, covers different aspects, which may be nuclear ship, pertaining to nuclear ship, which may be pertaining to the manning and equipment of ships. So, almost every aspect of shipping has been taken into account, and rules and regulations have been framed, which may be technical, which may be general, or legal requirements also at the same time. As far as technical requirements are concerned, which may be technical, but their non-presence or their absence would lead to legal repercussions, and therefore, the national legal systems or the domestic legal systems have incorporated all these regulations within their domestic legal system, so that international standard of a particular ship is maintained. So, friends, this was a partial regime as far as navigation and safety is concerned. We will continue to discuss about the safety of the passengers, safety of the cargoes in the upcoming modules and lectures. I thank you for your patient listening. Namaskar.